The moment Gabriel Zane stepped off the elevator into the penthouse hallway on the 42nd floor, briefcase in one hand and a cardboard box of essentials in the other, he heard singing coming from behind the door across from his new place. The voice was clear and melodic, completely unfiltered by any attempt at privacy, and he found himself frozen in place, listening to someone belt out an old jazz standard with surprising skill and zero self-consciousness. He had purchased the Penthouse 3 weeks ago, a celebration of sorts after his luxury furniture company had been acquired by a massive international conglomerate for an amount that still made his head spin when he thought about it too long. At 29, Gabriel had spent the last 7 years building his brand from the ground up, starting with a single showroom in Brooklyn and expanding to 15 locations across the East Coast. The acquisition meant he could finally breathe, finally live somewhere that was not also serving as his office and warehouse and crash pad all rolled into one. The singing stopped abruptly, and Gabriel realized he had been standing in the hallway like an idiot for at least 2 minutes. He shook his head, inserted the key into his door, and stepped into his new home. The space was massive, all floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Manhattan, hardwood floors that gleamed in the afternoon light, and enough square footage to make his old studio apartment seem like a closet. He set down the box and briefcase, already mentally arranging furniture that had not arrived yet, when a knock sounded at his door. When he opened it, a woman stood there holding a plate covered in aluminum foil. She was beautiful in an effortless way, with honey blonde hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, bright green eyes, and flour dusting her left cheek. She wore jeans and an oversized sweater, and her smile was warm and genuine. "Hi," she said. "I'm Fiona Dawson, your neighbor from across the hall. I heard someone moving around and figured I would bring over some cookies. Welcome to the building." Gabriel found himself momentarily unable to speak. He had dated plenty over the years, but work had always come first, and no one had ever really made him stop and reconsider his priorities. Something about the way this woman stood there, completely at ease and radiating kindness, made his chest feel tight. "Thank you," he finally managed. "I'm Gabriel Zane." "Nice to meet you, Gabriel." She handed him the plate. "They're chocolate chip. I bake when I'm stressed, and I have a performance review coming up at work, so you're the lucky recipient of my nervous energy." "Performance review?" he asked, taking the plate. The cookies were still warm. "I'm a music teacher at Lincoln Arts Academy," Fiona explained. "Middle school." "It's wonderful and terrifying in equal measure. Anyway, I will let you get back to unpacking. If you need anything, I'm in 4202. She was gone before he could think of something clever to say, disappearing back into her apartment across the hall. Gabriel stood there for a moment longer, then closed his door and looked down at the cookies. He pulled back the foil and took one. It was perfect, slightly crispy on the edges and soft in the middle, the chocolate still melted. He ate 3 more before he even thought about unpacking. Over the next week, Gabriel settled into the Penthouse. His furniture arrived, sleek and modern pieces that he had designed himself, and he spent his days setting up his home office and taking meetings with the team that was helping him transition out of day-to-day operations at the company. The acquisition deal included a 3-year consulting contract, which meant he was still involved, but no longer drowning in the minute details that had consumed his 20s. He saw Fiona occasionally, always in passing. She left early in the mornings, usually carrying a travel mug of coffee and a bag stuffed with sheet music. She came home in the afternoons, often talking on the phone to someone about lesson plans or student progress. Once he held the elevator for her when she was struggling with grocery bags, and they rode down to the parking garage together. "How are you settling in?" she asked, shifting the bags in her arms. Good, really good. It's nice to finally have space. He paused. Those cookies were incredible, by the way, best I've ever had. Fiona laughed. You're very kind. I've been baking since I was 8. My grandmother taught me. It's sort of my therapy. Does your performance review have you that stressed? A little. It's not just the review. There's talk of budget cuts, and the arts program is always first on the chopping block. I've been trying to put together proposals to show how valuable music education is, but it feels like shouting into the void sometimes. Gabriel wanted to ask more, to offer help somehow, but the elevator doors opened, and Fiona gave him a quick wave before heading to her car. He stood there watching her go, feeling that same tightness in his chest that he had felt the day they met. 3 days later, Gabriel was coming home from a dinner meeting when he heard music drifting through Fiona's door again. This time it was not singing but piano, something classical and melancholic. He stood in the hallway listening, his hand on his own doorknob, completely captivated by the way the notes seemed to hang in the air. When the music stopped, he finally went inside, but the melody stayed with him for the rest of the evening. The next morning, he woke up with an idea. He spent an hour on the phone with his lawyer and another hour researching nonprofits that supported arts education. By noon, he had set up a meeting with the development director at Lincoln Arts Academy. By the end of the week, he had committed to funding the music program for the next 5 years, complete with new instruments, additional staff, and an expansion of the curriculum. He did it all anonymously through his foundation, because the last thing he wanted was for Fiona to think he was trying to buy her attention or affection. He ran into her again the following Monday. She practically tackled him in the hallway, her eyes bright with tears. "Gabriel, you will not believe what happened," she said, grabbing his arm. "Someone donated to the school, an anonymous donor. They're funding the entire music program. We're not getting cut. We're expanding. I've been crying for 2 days straight." Gabriel felt his heart swell at the joy in her voice. "That's amazing, Fiona. You must be relieved." "Relieved does not even begin to cover it. I've been walking on air. My students are going to have opportunities I only dreamed of giving them." She wiped at her eyes. "Sorry, I'm a mess. I just had to tell someone, and you're the only person I've seen today." "I'm glad you told me," he said, meaning it completely. She surprised him by pulling him into a hug. It was brief, just a quick squeeze, but Gabriel felt the warmth of it long after she pulled away. "Anyway, I'm making dinner tonight to celebrate. Do you want to come over? It's the least I can do after you've been such a great neighbor." Gabriel agreed without hesitation. That evening, he showed up at her door with a bottle of wine, nervous in a way he had not been since his first big sales pitch years ago. Fiona answered wearing a dress this time, something simple and blue that matched the paint on her kitchen walls visible behind her. Her apartment was smaller than his, cozy and lived in, with bookshelves overflowing with novels and sheet music, plants in every corner and photographs covering nearly every surface. "Come in," she said, stepping aside. "Fair warning, I'm a decent cook but nothing fancy. I hope you like pasta." "I love pasta," Gabriel said, following her inside. The apartment smelled incredible, garlic and tomatoes and fresh bread. He handed her the wine and she set it on the counter to open while he looked around. "Your place is great," he said, taking in the warmth of it. His own penthouse suddenly felt cold and sterile in comparison. "It's home," Fiona said with a smile. "I've been here for 3 years. Rent control is the only reason I can afford this neighborhood. That and the fact that my uncle owns the building and gives me a family discount." They ate at her small dining table by the window, the city lights spreading out below them. Fiona talked about her students, about the kids who struggled and the ones who excelled, about the moment when a child finally understood a concept they had been wrestling with for weeks. Gabriel found himself telling her about his company, about the years of grueling work and sleepless nights, about the satisfaction of seeing something he built become successful. "What made you start a furniture company?" Fiona asked, twirling pasta on her fork. "My father was a carpenter," Gabriel said. "He died when I was 16, and I inherited his tools and his workshop. I spent the next few years making pieces in my spare time, selling them online. It started as a way to feel close to him, I guess. Then it became something more. I wanted to create furniture that was beautiful and functional, things people would keep for a lifetime." "That's really beautiful," Fiona said softly. "He would be proud of you." "I hope so." They talked for hours, long after the plates were cleared and the wine bottle was empty. Fiona told him about growing up in a big family upstate, about her 3 brothers and her parents who still called her every Sunday. Gabriel told her about being an only child, about his mother who had remarried and moved to Florida. They discovered they both loved old movies and hated running but did it anyway, that they both had a weakness for bad reality television they would never admit to in public. When Gabriel finally left, well past midnight, he felt like he had known Fiona for years instead of weeks. He lay in bed that night thinking about her laugh, the way her eyes crinkled at the corners, the way she listened with her whole body, leaning forward and nodding and making him feel like everything he said mattered. Over the next month, they fell into an easy rhythm. Gabriel would knock on Fiona's door some evenings, and they would order takeout or she would cook, and they would talk until late. Other times, she would text him asking if he wanted to watch a movie, and he would bring popcorn and they would sprawl on her couch, arguing good-naturedly about plot holes and character motivations. They started running together in the mornings, meeting in the lobby at 6 and jogging through Central Park as the city woke up around them. Gabriel found himself thinking about her constantly. She was in his head when he was in meetings, when he was reviewing contracts, when he was falling asleep at night. He wanted to kiss her, to hold her hand, to tell her that she had become the best part of his day. But he was terrified of ruining what they had, of making things awkward when they lived across the hall from each other. Fiona seemed oblivious to his internal struggle. She was affectionate in a way that made it hard to read her intentions, always hugging him hello and goodbye, touching his arm when she laughed, falling asleep against his shoulder during movies. Gabriel did not know if she felt the same pull he did, or if he was just a good friend and convenient neighbor. Everything changed on a Friday night in early October. They had plans to try a new Thai restaurant downtown, but Fiona called him an hour before they were supposed to leave, her voice thick with tears. "I'm sorry I can't do dinner tonight," she said. "Something came up." "Are you okay?" Gabriel asked immediately, already grabbing his keys. "I'm fine. I just need to cancel." "Fiona, you're crying. What happened?" There was a long pause. "Can you come over?" He was at her door in 30 seconds. When she opened it, her eyes were red and puffy and she was clutching a tissue. Gabriel stepped inside, closing the door behind him. "What's going on?" he asked gently. "My ex called," Fiona said, sinking onto the couch. "We dated for 4 years. He broke up with me about 6 months before you moved in. It was messy. He said he needed space to figure himself out. I just found out through a mutual friend that he got engaged last month to someone he's been dating for 3 months. Gabriel sat down next to her, anger flaring hot in his chest. "I'm sorry, that's awful. The worst part is that I don't even miss him anymore," Fiona said, wiping at her eyes. "I'm over him. I've been over him for a while, but hearing that just made me feel so stupid. Like our entire relationship was a waste of time." "It was not a waste," Gabriel said firmly. "You loved him. That's never a waste, even if it did not work out." Fiona looked at him, her eyes searching his face. "How are you still single, Gabriel? You're smart and successful and kind. You should have someone." He almost said it then, almost told her that the reason he had not been dating was because he was completely and utterly in love with her. Instead, he said, "I guess I've been waiting for the right person." "What's the right person like?" Fiona asked, and there was something in her voice that made Gabriel's heart race. He held her gaze. "She's kind. She lights up when she talks about the things she loves. She makes the world feel smaller and bigger at the same time. She bakes when she's stressed and sings when she thinks no one is listening. She's beautiful, but she does not seem to know it." Fiona's breath caught. "Gabriel." "I'm talking about you," he said, because there was no point in pretending anymore. "I've been talking about you since the day you showed up at my door with cookies. I'm in love with you, Fiona. I have been for a while now." For a moment, she just stared at him, and Gabriel felt panic rising in his throat. Then she moved, closing the distance between them and kissing him. It was soft and tentative at first, then deeper, her hands coming up to cup his face. Gabriel wrapped his arms around her, pulling her close, and everything else fell away. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Fiona rested her forehead against his. "I've been hoping you would say that," she whispered. "I was so scared I was imagining the way you looked at me." "You were not imagining anything," Gabriel said, kissing her again. They stayed up all night talking, this time about feelings they had been holding back, about the little moments that had made them fall for each other. Fiona confessed that she had started looking forward to seeing him more than anything else in her day. Gabriel admitted that he had been taking the stairs sometimes just so he might run into her in the hallway. They laughed at their own ridiculousness, at how much time they had wasted being afraid. The next morning, Gabriel woke up on Fiona's couch, her body curled against his, sunlight streaming through the windows. He looked down at her sleeping face and felt a sense of peace he had never experienced before. This was what he had been working toward his whole life, not the money or the success, but this moment right here. Fiona stirred, her eyes fluttering open. When she saw him, she smiled. Hi, he said, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Last night really happened." "It really happened." She stretched, then sat up. "I'm making pancakes. You're staying for breakfast." It was not a question, and Gabriel would not have argued even if it was. They spent the weekend together, barely leaving her apartment except to grab food and coffee. They watched movies and talked and kissed on the couch like teenagers. Gabriel felt like he was making up for lost time, for all the years he had spent focused on work instead of building a life. On Sunday evening, as they were making dinner together in her tiny kitchen, Fiona asked, "So what exactly do you do now? You mentioned you sold your company, but you still seem busy." Gabriel explained the acquisition, the consulting contract, the foundation he had started to give back to causes he cared about. He did not mention the music program donation, but he told her about other projects he was working on, scholarships for design students and grants for small businesses. "That's incredible," Fiona said, stirring the pasta sauce. "You're using your success to help people. That's really special, Gabriel." He kissed her temple. "I learned from the best. You're changing kids' lives every single day." Over the next few months, they became inseparable. Gabriel had never been in a relationship that felt this easy, this right. Fiona understood when he had to travel for meetings, and he made sure to be there for her school concerts and recitals. They spent holidays together, Thanksgiving with her family upstate and Christmas with his mother in Florida. Fiona fit seamlessly into his life, and he into hers. In January, 6 months after that first kiss, Gabriel took Fiona to the workshop where he had started his company. It was a warehouse in Brooklyn, still filled with tools and half-finished pieces, a space he had kept even after the acquisition because he could not bear to let it go. "This is where it all started," he said, showing her around. "I would come here after my day job and work until 2 in the morning, sometimes later." Fiona ran her hand along a work table, taking in the space. "I can see you here. I can picture you covered in sawdust, completely focused." "I want you to have something," Gabriel said. He led her to the back of the workshop, where a piece sat covered by a tarp. He pulled the tarp off, revealing a piano bench, beautifully crafted from cherry wood with inlaid detail along the edges. Fiona gasped. "Gabriel, this is stunning. I made it for you. I thought you could use it at home or maybe donate it to the school, whatever you want." She turned to him, tears in her eyes. "You made this for me. I wanted to give you something that combined both our worlds, music and woodworking." Fiona threw her arms around him, holding him tight. "I love it. I love you." It was the first time she had said it out loud, and Gabriel felt his heart expand. "I love you too." They spent the rest of the evening in the workshop, Gabriel showing her how to sand and stain wood while Fiona peppered him with questions about the process. She was genuinely interested, and he loved sharing this part of himself with her. Spring arrived, and with it, new opportunities. The music program at Lincoln Arts Academy was thriving, with students winning regional competitions and getting scholarships to prestigious summer programs. Fiona was happier than Gabriel had ever seen her, pouring her energy into teaching and mentoring. Gabriel's consulting contract was winding down, and he was starting to think about what came next, what he wanted to build now that he had the freedom and resources to do anything. One evening in May, they were having dinner at his penthouse, a rare occurrence since Fiona's place had become their default hangout spot. Gabriel had cooked or attempted to, and Fiona was laughing at his slightly burnt salmon. "I appreciate the effort," she said, cutting into the fish. "It's the thought that counts." "I should stick to furniture," Gabriel admitted. "You definitely should." He took a sip of water, then set down his glass. "I've been thinking about something. The consulting contract ends in a few months, and I need to figure out what I'm doing with my life." "You have a foundation. That's something." "It is, but I want more. I want to build something again. I was thinking about starting a new company, something different. Maybe custom furniture for schools and nonprofits sold at cost. Make beautiful, functional pieces accessible to places that usually get whatever's cheapest." Fiona's eyes lit up. "Gabriel, that's brilliant. You would be changing so many spaces, making them better for the people who use them every day. You think it's a good idea." "I think it's a perfect idea, and I think you should absolutely do it." Her confidence in him made Gabriel feel invincible. "I'm going to need a lot of input on what schools actually need. Would you be willing to consult?" "I would be honored," Fiona said, grinning. They spent the rest of the evening brainstorming, Fiona listing all the things her school could use, from better music stands to classroom furniture that was actually comfortable. Gabriel took notes, his mind already spinning with designs and possibilities. In June, Gabriel officially launched his new company, Cornerstone Collective. The name came from Fiona, who said that good furniture was the cornerstone of a functional space. He hired a small team, rented a workspace, and started taking orders. The response was overwhelming, with schools and community centers from across the country reaching out. Fiona was his biggest supporter, attending every meeting where he needed feedback, helping him understand the needs of teachers and students. She was also his refuge when things got stressful, the person who could make him laugh after a long day and remind him why he was doing this in the first place. One Friday evening in late July, Gabriel came home to find Fiona waiting in the hallway outside their apartments. She was dressed up, wearing a sundress and heels, her hair down in loose waves. "We're going out," she announced. "We are. Yes, you've been working non-stop for weeks. I'm taking you to dinner and then we're seeing a show. No arguments." Gabriel could not help but smile. "Yes, madam." She took him to a small Italian restaurant in the West Village, the kind of place with checkered tablecloths and candles in wine bottles. They shared a carafe of red wine and split 3 different pasta dishes, feeding each other bites and laughing at nothing in particular. After dinner, they walked to a nearby theater where a friend of Fiona's was performing in an off-Broadway musical. The show was excellent, but Gabriel spent most of it watching Fiona instead, the way her face lit up during the big numbers, the way she mouthed along to songs she clearly knew by heart. During intermission, she caught him staring. "What?" she asked, smiling. "I'm just happy," Gabriel said simply. She laced her fingers through his. "Me too." After the show, they walked back to the apartment, taking the long route through Washington Square Park. The summer air was warm, the city alive with people and music and the endless hum of traffic. Gabriel pulled Fiona close, her head resting on his shoulder. "I've been thinking," he said. "That's dangerous," he laughed. "I've been thinking that I want you to move in with me." Fiona stopped walking, looking up at him. "Really? Really?" "I know we live across the hall from each other, so it seems a little silly, but I want to wake up with you every morning. I want to come home to you every night. I want all of it, Fiona." She was quiet for a moment, and Gabriel felt nerves flutter in his stomach. Then she smiled, that beautiful, bright smile that had first captured his attention a year ago. "Okay," she said. "Okay? Yes, okay, let's do it." Gabriel picked her up and spun her around, both of them laughing. When he set her down, he kissed her, long and slow, not caring that they were in the middle of a crowded park. Fiona moved in 2 weeks later, though most of her things were already scattered around his place anyway. Gabriel loved the way her presence transformed his penthouse, making it feel like an actual home instead of a showroom. Her books lined the shelves, her plants filled the corners, her music was always playing in the background. They settled into a rhythm that felt natural and right. Gabriel worked on building Cornerstone Collective, traveling occasionally to visit clients and oversee installations. Fiona continued teaching, starting to take on private students in the evenings to supplement her income. They cooked together, ran together, spent weekends exploring the city or staying in and doing nothing at all. In September, Fiona's parents came to visit. Gabriel was nervous, wanting to make a good impression. He had met them briefly at Thanksgiving the year before, but this felt different now that he and Fiona were living together. Her father, Frank, was a retired police officer with a firm handshake and a protective streak. Her mother, Margaret, was warm and talkative, immediately making herself at home in their kitchen. Her 3 brothers showed up on the second day of the visit, and Gabriel found himself surrounded by loud, opinionated, fiercely loving people who clearly adored Fiona. "So you're the furniture guy," her oldest brother Tom said during dinner. "That's me," Gabriel replied. "Fiona says you're doing good work, schools and nonprofits." "I'm trying," Tom nodded approvingly. "Good. She deserves someone who cares about more than just making money." "Tom, stop interrogating him," Fiona said, but she was smiling. "I'm not interrogating. I'm assessing." Gabriel appreciated the protectiveness, even if it made him slightly uncomfortable. By the end of the weekend, he felt like he had passed whatever test Fiona's family had set for him. Her mother hugged him goodbye, whispering, "Take care of our girl." "I will," Gabriel promised. October arrived, bringing cooler weather and the 1-year anniversary of their first kiss. Gabriel had been planning for weeks, wanting to do something special. He arranged for them to have dinner at the restaurant where they had gone on what Fiona jokingly called their first real date, even though they had already been in love by then. After dinner, he took her back to the workshop in Brooklyn. He had transformed the space for the evening, stringing lights across the ceiling and setting up a small seating area with the piano bench he had made for her. "Gabriel, this is beautiful," Fiona said, looking around in wonder. "I wanted to bring you back to where I told you about my work, where I gave you the bench. This place is important to me, and you're the most important person in my life." He took her hands, his heart pounding. "This year with you has been the best of my life. You've made me happier than I ever thought possible. You've supported my dreams and challenged me to be better. I love you more than I can put into words." Gabriel got down on one knee, pulling a small velvet box from his pocket. Fiona's eyes went wide, her hands flying to her mouth. "Fiona Dawson, will you marry me?" She was crying, nodding before he even finished the question. "Yes. Yes, absolutely yes." He slipped the ring onto her finger, a simple platinum band with a single diamond, elegant and classic just like her. When he stood, she threw herself into his arms, kissing him through her tears. "I can't believe you did this," she said, laughing and crying at the same time. "I love you so much. I love you too." They stayed in the workshop for hours, sitting on the floor and talking about their future, about the wedding they would plan and the life they would build together. Gabriel felt a sense of completeness, like everything he had worked for and dreamed about had led him to this moment. The next few months were a whirlwind of wedding planning. Fiona wanted something simple and intimate, just family and close friends. They chose a small venue upstate, near where she had grown up, a restored barn with views of the mountains. The date was set for the following June, giving them time to plan without rushing. Cornerstone Collective continued to grow, with Gabriel hiring more staff and opening a second workshop. He was busier than ever, but he made sure to carve out time for Fiona, for their relationship. She was equally busy with teaching and planning the wedding, but they never lost sight of what mattered most. In December, they spent Christmas with Gabriel's mother in Florida. She had met Fiona several times and adored her, and the three of them had a quiet, lovely holiday together. On New Year's Eve back in New York, Gabriel and Fiona hosted a party at the Penthouse for their friends. At midnight, surrounded by people they loved, they kissed and toasted to the year ahead. Spring brought final wedding preparations. Fiona found a dress, something simple and lace with a flowing skirt. Gabriel worked with a tailor to get a custom suit made. They chose flowers and music and wrote their own vows. Through it all, there was no stress, no fighting, just excitement about the life they were building. The week before the wedding, Fiona's parents hosted a rehearsal dinner at a restaurant near the venue. Gabriel's mother was there, along with Fiona's entire family and their closest friends. Speeches were made, stories were shared, and Gabriel felt overwhelmed by the love and support surrounding them. On the morning of the wedding, Gabriel woke up in a guest room at the bed and breakfast where they were staying. He was not supposed to see Fiona until the ceremony, a tradition she had insisted on. He spent the morning with his groomsmen, Fiona's brothers who had insisted on filling the role, getting ready and trying not to be nervous. The ceremony was at 4 in the afternoon, golden sunlight streaming through the windows of the barn. Gabriel stood at the front with the officiant, a family friend of Fiona's, waiting for his bride. When the doors opened and he saw her walking down the aisle on her father's arm, everything else disappeared. She was radiant, glowing with happiness, and Gabriel felt tears prick his eyes. When she reached him, Frank placed her hand in Gabriel's. "Take care of each other," he said, his voice gruff with emotion. "We will," Gabriel promised. The ceremony was short and sweet. They exchanged vows they had written, promises to love and support and challenge each other, to build a life filled with laughter and adventure. When the officiant pronounced them married, Gabriel kissed Fiona like it was the first time and the 1,000th time all at once. The reception was a celebration in the truest sense, with good food and great music and dancing that lasted late into the night. Fiona's students from the music program formed a small ensemble and played during dinner, a surprise that made her cry happy tears. Gabriel danced with his new wife under string lights, holding her close and marveling at how lucky he was. Later, as they cut the cake and toasted with champagne, Fiona leaned over and whispered, "Best day of my life." "Mine too," Gabriel said, kissing her forehead. They honeymooned in Italy, 2 weeks of exploring cities and eating incredible food and getting lost in narrow cobblestone streets. They visited furniture makers and artisans, drawing inspiration for Gabriel's work. They went to concerts and operas, feeding Fiona's love of music. Mostly, they just enjoyed being together, being married, being in love. When they returned to New York, they settled back into their routine, but everything felt different now. Gabriel loved introducing Fiona as his wife, loved seeing the wedding band on her finger. They started talking seriously about the future, about when they might want to start a family. In October, a little over a year after Gabriel had proposed, Fiona told him she was pregnant. They were having dinner at home, just a quiet Tuesday evening, when she handed him a small wrapped box. "What's this?" Gabriel asked. "Open it." Inside was a tiny pair of baby shoes. Gabriel stared at them for a moment, not understanding, and then it clicked. He looked up at Fiona, his eyes wide. "Are you serious?" She nodded, tears streaming down her face. "We're having a baby." Gabriel stood so fast he nearly knocked over his chair, pulling her into his arms. "We're having a baby," he repeated, the words sinking in. They spent the evening talking about names and nurseries, and all the ways their lives were about to change. Gabriel felt a mixture of excitement and terror, but mostly overwhelming love for this woman and the family they were creating together. The pregnancy was smooth, and Fiona continued teaching until her 8th month, when she finally agreed to take maternity leave. Gabriel cut back his hours at work, wanting to be present for every moment. They transformed one of the spare bedrooms into a nursery, painting the walls a soft yellow and filling the space with furniture Gabriel had made himself, a crib and changing table and bookshelf. Their daughter was born on a warm evening in June, 2 years to the day after their wedding. Gabriel Zane came into the world screaming, healthy and perfect. Gabriel held her for the first time and felt his entire world shift. He looked at Fiona, exhausted and radiant in the hospital bed, and knew that this was what he had been working toward his entire life. They brought Grace home to the penthouse, adjusting to the sleepless nights and constant feedings with a mixture of exhaustion and joy. Gabriel had never known he could love someone so much so quickly. He watched Fiona with their daughter, singing lullabies and rocking her to sleep, and fell in love with his wife all over again. Months passed in a blur of firsts. Grace's first smile, her first laugh, her first time rolling over. Gabriel documented everything, taking pictures and videos, wanting to remember every moment. Fiona went back to teaching part-time when Grace was 6 months old, and they hired a nanny to help during the day. On Grace's first birthday, they threw a party at the Penthouse, inviting family and friends to celebrate. The apartment was filled with balloons and decorations, and Grace sat in her high chair, smashing her hands into a small cake Fiona had made. Gabriel stood next to his wife, their daughter giggling between them, and felt a profound sense of gratitude. That evening, after everyone had left and Grace was asleep in her crib, Gabriel and Fiona collapsed on the couch together. "We did it," Fiona said, resting her head on his shoulder. "We survived the first year. We did more than survive. We thrived." She looked up at him. "Do you remember when you first moved in across the hall? I had no idea that bringing you cookies would change my entire life." "Best cookies I ever had," Gabriel said, kissing her. "Best neighbor I ever had." They sat in comfortable silence, listening to the sounds of the city outside their windows. Gabriel thought about the journey that had brought them here, from that first day in the hallway to this moment, a family. He thought about the years ahead, watching Grace grow up, maybe having more children, building a life filled with love and laughter and music. "What are you thinking about?" Fiona asked. "I'm thinking about how perfect this is, how perfect you are, how grateful I am for every single day. Even the days when Grace screams for 3 hours straight, especially those days, because we're doing it together." Fiona smiled, that same bright, beautiful smile that had captured his heart from the very beginning. "Together," she agreed. Gabriel wrapped his arm around his wife, holding her close, and knew that he had everything he had ever wanted. The success and the money were nice, but they were nothing compared to this, to the woman he loved and the family they had built. He had moved into that penthouse, expecting nothing more than a fresh start, a new chapter in his life. Instead, he had found everything he had been searching for without even knowing it. Years continued to unfold with a beautiful predictability that Gabriel had never experienced before in his life. Grace grew from a babbling toddler into a curious, energetic child who seemed to have inherited her mother's love of music and her father's meticulous attention to detail. By the time she was 3, she was already picking out simple melodies on the small piano Fiona had set up in the corner of the living room. Cornerstone Collective had expanded beyond Gabriel's initial vision. What had started as custom furniture for schools and nonprofits had evolved into a full-scale operation with workshops in 4 cities and a team of 50 employees. Gabriel was proud of what they had built, but he was even more proud that he had managed to do it without sacrificing time with his family. He had learned from his earlier years, when work had consumed everything, and he made sure to be home for dinner most nights, to be present for the important moments. On a crisp Saturday morning in October, when Grace was 4 years old, the family went to Central Park. It had become their tradition. These weekend mornings spent feeding ducks and playing on the playground and getting hot chocolate from the vendor near the entrance. Grace ran ahead on the path, her small legs pumping as she chased after pigeons. "Careful, sweetheart," Fiona called out, but she was smiling. Gabriel took his wife's hand, lacing their fingers together. "She has your energy." "She has your stubbornness," Fiona countered. Fair point. They walked in comfortable silence for a while, watching their daughter explore. Gabriel thought about how much his life had changed in the 5 years since he had moved into that penthouse. He had been so focused on the next big thing, on building and achieving and proving himself. Meeting Fiona had shifted everything, had shown him that success meant nothing if you had no one to share it with. "I want to have another baby," Fiona said suddenly. Gabriel looked at her, surprised. They had talked about having more children, but the timing had never felt quite right. Yeah, Grace is getting older and I miss having a baby in the house. Plus, I think she would be a great big sister." "I think so too," Gabriel said, pulling Fiona close. "Let's do it." By Thanksgiving, Fiona was pregnant again. They told Grace on Christmas morning, wrapping up a big sister t-shirt and watching her face light up when she understood what it meant. She spent the rest of the day talking to Fiona's stomach, telling her future sibling about all the things they would do together. Their son was born the following summer, a calm, easy baby they named Benjamin Frank Zane after both of their fathers. Grace was instantly smitten, wanting to help with everything from diaper changes to bath time. Gabriel watched his family grow and felt his heart expand in ways he had not known were possible. Balancing two children and their respective careers required more juggling than before, but Gabriel and Fiona worked as a team. They took turns with nighttime feedings, coordinated their schedules so one of them was always home, and made sure to carve out time for just the two of them. Date nights became sacred, a few hours every couple of weeks where they could remember who they were beyond mom and dad. When Benjamin was 6 months old, Fiona made a decision that surprised Gabriel. She came home from school one day and announced that she was leaving her teaching position at Lincoln Arts Academy to start her own music school. "I've been thinking about it for a while," she explained as they sat on the couch after the kids were in bed. "I love teaching, but I want more flexibility. I want to be able to set my own hours to focus on the students who really need it. And I want to create a space that is welcoming to everyone, regardless of their ability to pay." "That sounds amazing," Gabriel said. "How can I help?" "I was hoping you would ask that. I need funding to get started, to rent a space and buy instruments and hire teachers. I know it's a risk." "It's not a risk if I believe in you," Gabriel interrupted. "And I do. Completely." They spent the next few months working together to launch the Dawson School of Music. Gabriel helped with the business side, setting up the structure and finances, while Fiona focused on curriculum and hiring. They found a space in Brooklyn, a bright, open studio with good acoustics and plenty of room for growth. By fall, they had enrolled their first 30 students, a mix of kids from all backgrounds and skill levels. Fiona thrived in her new role, pouring her energy and passion into building something meaningful. Gabriel loved watching her in her element, teaching and mentoring and inspiring the next generation of musicians. Grace started taking violin lessons at the school, and Gabriel would sometimes bring Benjamin by to watch, sitting in the back of the room and marveling at what his wife had created. Life settled into a new rhythm. Gabriel continued to grow Cornerstone Collective, but he had learned to delegate more, to trust his team to handle the day-to-day operations. He spent more time in the workshop, designing and building pieces himself, reconnecting with the hands-on work that had first drawn him to the craft. Fiona split her time between the music school and home, often bringing work with her but always present for the important moments. Grace started kindergarten, and Benjamin began walking and talking, his first words a garbled version of his sister's name. The penthouse that had once felt too big now felt perfectly sized, filled with toys and art projects and the constant noise of family life. Gabriel had never been happier. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Gabriel surprised Fiona with a trip back to the workshop in Brooklyn where he had proposed. He had recreated the setup from that night, the string lights and the intimate seating area, but this time there was something new. In the center of the space sat a piano, a beautiful upright he had been restoring for months. "Gabriel," Fiona breathed, running her hands over the keys. "This is incredible. I've been working on it in secret. I wanted to give you something special, something that represents both of us." She sat down and began to play, filling the workshop with music. Gabriel stood behind her, his hands on her shoulders, listening. When she finished, she turned around and pulled him down for a kiss. "Thank you," she said, "for this, for everything, for being the most amazing husband and father and partner I could ask for. Thank you for saying yes to coffee, to moving in, to marrying me. Thank you for building this life with me." They spent the evening there, just the two of them, talking and laughing and remembering all the moments that had led them to this point. Gabriel thought about that first day, standing in the hallway and hearing Fiona sing. He had been so focused on his new penthouse, on starting fresh, that he had not expected to find love. But there she had been, right across the hall, bringing him cookies and changing his life forever. As the years continued to pass, Gabriel and Fiona watched their children grow. Grace developed a love for both music and woodworking, spending hours with Fiona at the piano, and then heading to the workshop with Gabriel to build small projects. Benjamin was quieter, more reserved, but he had a creativity that manifested in drawing and storytelling. The Dawson School of Music expanded, eventually moving to a larger space and enrolling over 200 students. Cornerstone Collective became a household name in the education and nonprofit sectors, known for quality and affordability. But more than any professional success, Gabriel was proudest of his family, of the home he and Fiona had built together. On a Sunday morning when Grace was 10 and Benjamin was 6, the whole family was in the kitchen making breakfast. Fiona was at the stove flipping pancakes while Gabriel set the table. The kids were arguing good-naturedly about whose turn it was to pick the music. "I think it's Dad's turn," Fiona said, settling the debate. Gabriel pulled out his phone and put on an old jazz standard, the same song he had heard Fiona singing that very first day. She looked up at him and smiled, recognizing it immediately. "That's cheating," she said. "Is it?" Gabriel asked, pulling her into a dance despite the pancakes needing attention. Grace groaned dramatically while Benjamin laughed, but Gabriel did not care. He spun Fiona around the kitchen, both of them laughing, and felt the same rush of happiness he had felt every day since they met. Later that afternoon, after the dishes were done and the kids were occupied with their own activities, Gabriel and Fiona sat on the balcony of the penthouse, coffee cups in hand. The city stretched out before them, endless and alive. "You ever think about how different things could have been?" Fiona asked. "If you had bought a different apartment or if I had been too shy to bring over those cookies." "All the time," Gabriel admitted. "And then I remember that I do not believe in coincidence. I think we were always supposed to find each other." "That's very romantic of you." "I'm a romantic guy when it comes to you." Fiona leaned her head on his shoulder. "I'm glad you moved into the penthouse. I'm glad you were my neighbor. I'm glad for all of it." "Me too," Gabriel said, kissing the top of her head. "Best decision I ever made." They sat there as the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Inside, they could hear Grace practicing violin and Benjamin singing along, slightly off-key. It was perfectly imperfect, exactly the life Gabriel had not known he wanted until he had it. He thought about the young man he had been when he moved in, driven and ambitious, but also lonely in ways he had not fully acknowledged. He thought about the journey that had brought him here, all the hard work and sacrifice and eventual success. But none of it compared to this, to the woman beside him and the family they had created. Gabriel Zane had moved into the penthouse expecting a fresh start, a new chapter where he could enjoy the fruits of his labor. Instead, he had found something infinitely more valuable. He had found love in its truest form, the kind that grew and deepened with time, the kind that transformed ordinary moments into extraordinary ones. He had found his home, not in the expensive apartment with its stunning views, but in the laughter of his children and the warmth of his wife's smile. And as the city lights began to twinkle on around them, Gabriel held Fiona a little closer and thought about how lucky he was to have taken a chance on that penthouse, to have been in the hallway at just the right moment to hear her singing. Because that one decision, that one moment, had led to everything else. It had led to cookies and conversations, to late-night talks and early morning runs, to a proposal in a workshop and a wedding in a barn, to two beautiful children and a life filled with more joy than he had ever imagined possible. The future stretched out before them, uncertain and exciting, and Gabriel knew that whatever came next, they would face it together. Just as they always had, just as they always would. Because 5 years ago, he had moved into a penthouse expecting nothing, and instead had found everything. He had found the woman of his dreams living right across the hall, and together, they had built something beautiful and lasting and real. As stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Gabriel made a silent promise to never take any of it for granted, to cherish every moment, every laugh, every challenge. Because this was what mattered. Not the money or the success or the recognition, but this. Family, love, and the knowledge that he had found exactly where he belonged. And it had all started with a penthouse, a neighbor, and a plate of warm chocolate chip cookies.